Hey guys, Matt Gurney here, Jen Gerson with me in Alberta's capital. We're in Edmonton after a really successful night for our event last night. Great to be here recording a podcast, and honestly, only two things to talk about. Partially because it's been a strange news week, and partially because we're about to get kicked out of our Airbnb. So, lots to talk about, including scandal and treason at the federal government, and exactly what Jen and I have been warning about in Jen's hometown of Calgary. All that and more on the latest episode of the Line Podcast.
This episode of The Line has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Canada can be a global leader in reducing the harm caused by smoking, but it requires actionable steps, including giving adult smokers the information they need to choose potentially less harmful alternatives. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
Well, here we are. It is June 7th, 2024. We're recording this. We just had our event in Edmonton last night. A huge thank you to everyone who came out. It was a great success. CLAC, the Christian Labour Association of Canada, and was a sponsor. We had a broadcast partner with CPAC. Hugely grateful for them. The event was co-hosted by the Max Bell School of Public Policy from McGill University. Also a huge thanks to them. And friends of the line, Ken Bosencool, Colby Kosh, and a wonderful woman who brought us a box of donuts. So
From the donut mill. She actually came and gave us a giant box of donuts. It was a beautiful thing. It was a moment.
God bless readers of the line.
And, it was a great thing. Best panel, people.
Trevor Toom, Chris Reagan, and Lisa Raitt. Just huge thanks to everyone who was involved and for everyone who took the time to come out. We will figure out where the CPAC link of it is, and I guess Jen will include it in our next dispatch.
We will include it in our next dispatch. It is absolutely worth listening to. It touched on basically every issue that Matt and I have been focusing on for the last several years here at The Line. Absolutely worth listening to. It was great. We will find where it's linked. I think CPAC live streamed it.
Yes.
But the response that we got from it was great. That was hilarious. It was a very serious subject matter. Is Canada prepared for the next economic disaster? Which is usually a pretty hard topic to enliven. But I think, Matt, with your characteristic wit and charm, you and I managed to pull it off. It was definitely an easy listen. From my perspective, anyway.
Talking about Doom.
Never had so much fun talking about Doom. It was super fun. Of course, the drinks probably helped. But anyway, we definitely will be doing more of those types of events coming up. So pay attention. We'll keep you guys apprised. If you guys subscribe to our Substack, which you absolutely should be doing, you will be up to date on all of our events coming up.
The only thing, Jen, I'm going to add to this is just thanks to everyone who came out in Edmonton. It was great. Always nice to be in Edmonton, see friends here, see fans. And just purely as a programming note, if people are wondering where we are and why this podcast is a little rougher than normal, we're doing this just with our laptops in the field before Jen and I head back to our hometown. So we're squeezing out a quick Line podcast here because we love you and we don't want to miss an episode. And I guess, Jen, we have to talk about the only big news story this week.
There were actually two big news stories. One of them is the national story, and one of them is a local story here in Calgary, my hometown of Calgary, where I am not right now.
NSICOP is the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. It is one of the organizations that provides civilian executive oversight. It's not a parliamentary committee. It is composed of parliamentarians, but it was created by the government's executive to provide oversight and analysis of Canadian intelligence and national security, hence the name. NSICOP was one of the organizations tasked with looking into foreign interference by the federal government. And Dan, I'm going to take a minute here to run through the timeline of this because it's important. Okay. So we all remember over a year ago, foreign interference had been discussed for a long time, but over a year ago, it really exploded with a series of leaks to the Globe and Mail and Sam Cooper, who was then at Global News. This resulted, you'll recall, at first, the response was, well, it's racist to talk about this, and the Prime Minister lectured us. Mm-hmm. That didn't hold, and more allegations came out, and eventually NSIRA, the National Security Intelligence Review Agency, plus NSICOP were tasked to go look at this. and then that didn't hold. So we got the Johnston Commission, the Johnston Report. That didn't work. So we got the Hogue Commission, which is still ongoing. The reason I bring this up is because NSICOP and NSERA were two of the things that the federal government told us explicitly we could trust. Didn't need a public inquiry, had to be arm twisted even into the Johnston Report, because we had NSERA and NSICOP and they were on the case. And Sarah reported just a week before last, I think, and found that the procedures that the government had put in place to protect our elections integrity were insufficient. They gave like a thumbs down to those. And now NSICOP comes out this week in a pretty eye-opening report that says Canadian parliamentarians, I want to stress that, not necessarily MPs. The language was really interesting. This could include senators. But they said that Canadian parliamentarians have been witting or semi-witting accomplices of hostile governments seeking to undermine Canadian democracy and Canadian national security. So you strip away the rhetoric and the boilerplate, and what they're saying is that there are effectively traitors who may currently, in fact, be Canadian parliamentarians.
And the other thing that I think is worth noting in all of this is I saw some commentary from liberal-friendly individuals to the effect of, well, at least now we know that NSICOP does in fact work, unlike what those dastardly conservatives said, which sort of conveniently overlooks the fact that NSICOP itself basically has said that there are about 1,000 pages of documents that have been probably improperly hidden from them, with the excuse that this is covered by cabinet confidentiality, cabinet privilege, essentially. So, in fact, NSICOP has come up with quite a damning report, essentially accusing, as you said, parliamentarians of treason, while at the same time also openly stating that's just based on what we can get access to. There's still stuff that the current government is not appropriately handing over, in their opinion, using ordinary parliamentary procedures to sort of cover their ass. Another interesting point in all of this is the question of why is it that, given the damning nature of this report, that the Conservatives themselves haven't been more aggressive and assertive, both criticizing the government for not being more forthcoming with NSICOP, but also not being more forthcoming about naming and shaming the individuals who we presume at this point that the government must know. And of course, the assumption being that it's not just Liberals who have been implicated in this NSICOP report, that potentially also Conservatives have as well. Matt, I want to go on a rant about the degree to which we tolerate secrecy in Canada, because bluntly, we in Canada have become so complacent about issues of privacy and secrecy and protecting people's reputations and all of these things that we have now utterly denuded any kind of accountability and transparency measures in this country. And you see this at almost every level of government, from local police forces not releasing names of homicide victims to the total collapse of our freedom of access to information and our ATIP system. Not to say total collapse is probably too strong a word for it. You still can get ATIPs through, but it's not great. It's not great, Bob. We've reached the point now where, as you've made note on this podcast, the only way that reporters can really get access to any documents or any kind of insight into how internal government works is through public inquiries. That's not healthy. That's not normal. If you look at talk to any Canadian journalist about what it's like trying to get anybody to give you even basic information about how government runs here in Canada versus the same kind of procedures in America, we are radically non-transparent in how we function in this country. And I think that this NSICOP report, how goddamn dare you release a report like this and not include names? I'm sorry, that is not acceptable. There's no reason why the names shouldn't be included. NSICOP is not a body that can press charges. There's no reason to not include names here. And also, bluntly, it's stupid to not include names because the names are going to leak. We know the names are going to leak.
We know some of the names already.
We know some of the names already. Now, you and I can't say the names that we've heard because we've only heard this through rumor and hearsay. And you and I are just ordinary, plebes doing a podcast. So if we start speaking these names, these people can sue us for libel. But there's no reason why a body like NSICOP, or for example, I mean, Lisa Raitt made this point like last night in Edmonton. There's no reason why, for example, an MP of any party couldn't use parliamentary privilege to stand up in the House and start naming names. And if they did that, by the way, they would be protected from libel because you can't sue people for things they say in Parliament, essentially. So, and I asked that you'd have to get the speaker to rule on it. But once somebody says the name in Parliament, we can now report upon it because now we can say XX said in Parliament, so it gets put on the public record. Like there is no excuse for an MP to not have done this by now, and there is especially no strategic logic for it because at this point we know the names are going to come out.
I'm going to respond to that in sequence. First of all, yes. Agreed. There was a lot of speculation earlier in the week. There's a lot of wondering why the Conservatives had been so quiet on the first day this was announced. And I've poked around a bit about that. And my understanding is that they did not get a full briefing until the day after NSICOP released the report. So they kept their powder dry a little bit, looked at what it was, and then went with it. But I also think, Jen, to your point, no one should be under any illusions that it's only the Liberals who've been targeted for foreign interference.
Of course.
And I think the Conservatives are going to find that they have been compromised alongside the Liberals. I think it's both of them. And I think the Conservatives were nervous earlier in the week that they didn't know what they didn't know. And I think that helps explain a little bit of that delay.
It explains, it doesn't excuse, though.
Agreed. Yep. No, I agree. And there are very important considerations here that we should not dismiss. We have to be careful that any revelations we make do not compromise sources and methods. And obviously, people are innocent until proven guilty, and there are due process concerns. But
like I said, we're not talking about putting people in jail without due process here.
I think
that's not what we're talking about.
What we have to
releasing their names does not violate any reasonable expectation of privacy. It doesn't convict them of anything criminal before it is appropriate to do so. That's just. I don't see that's. I don't see that. I understand that we have to treat people as innocent of a criminal charge before they are proven guilty of it. I get it. We can't go out and say XX committed treason. What we absolutely can say is, according to an NSICOP report, XX individual engaged in this behavior that we found to be inappropriate. There's no protections for that.
To finish the thought that I was going on there.
Sorry, I'm getting spicy.
There are any number of precedents of leaders of either political parties or governments removing people from caucus after allegations.
Sure.
And the allegations can be personal misconduct, sexual harassment, or moral failings. It could be financial failings, possibly a contract going to a family member. It can be criminal matters. It could be something very serious. It could be, I don't want to say not serious, but it could be something more routine like drugs or an impaired driving charge, things like this.
Sure.
There is boundless precedent in Canada of, in that situation, a party leader going, until this matter can be investigated, you're out of caucus. You are removed from caucus. You are removed of all your responsibilities. And when that happens, no one talks about the due process rights. No one talks about innocence of proven guilty. It is understood that the integrity of political parties as institutions, but also importantly, the integrity of government, requires a degree of public faith and public confidence. And I'm looking at how, again, both major parties, mainly the Liberals, but both major parties, I think, need to stop thinking about this in terms of political damage control, and they need to start thinking about this as, how do we maintain public confidence in the system itself? Because you can't have public confidence in a system where there are apparently foreign agents, for lack of a better term, inside our government. Do you know that video game Among Us?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically,
my kids will tell you all about Among Us.
Among Us is a game that my kids play too. It's a multiplayer game. There's a bunch of little cartoon characters on a cartoon spaceship, And when the game starts, one person in that group is randomly selected to be the killer. And it is their job to sneak around the ship and kill the crew and to sabotage the spaceship. And the rest of the players have to try and figure out who that person is. We have turned our parliament into a game of Among Us. And I think the leaders of the parties right now are responding with ass-covering defensiveness rather than going, what is the first principle here? The first principle has to be protecting the integrity of our democracy. And that has to involve, at the very least, removing implicated individuals from caucus pending some kind of process.
Well, and also it's bad. Let's just talk from pure Machiavellian strategy. It's really, really bad strategy to look like you're trying to cover up individuals who've been accused of this in your caucus when you know the names are going to come out. And I would like to point this out. The names are going to come out. That secret is not getting kept. Okay, guys? So the names are coming. You're not going to be able to keep that from leaking, either officially or unofficially. So there is no fantasy world by which you can protect these people. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So moving on, if you want to cover your butt, get ahead of the leaking of the names, kick these people from caucus, and make a show of it.
You know, I've used blunter language, but I've told some of my political friends that there need to be, like, politically speaking, public executions in front of Parliament. And there will be first
not literal public executions.
I said politically speaking.
Figurative.
There will be first mover advantage for a party that decides that they're going to be the one to do that metaphorical public execution by the eternal flame in Parliament. And this is one of those happy circumstances, Jen, where what's good for the country is also in the base self-interests of the people who get to make the decisions. But what I'm worried about is, we talked about this at the event last night, that the Canadian political muscle memory is so programmed to avoid accountability that they're going to have to kind of play out their almost like brainstem level instinctive, we're going to rag the puck and we're going to avoid questions and we're not going to talk about this. And then probably like the frontal cortexes will kick in eventually and be like, actually what we're doing is really stupid. What we're doing is counterproductive and we're actually exposing ourselves to more danger and risk. Mm-hmm. But it's going to take a few days of panicky, reflexive ass covering before they think, you know what, actually these names are going to come out. The Globe probably has the names already.
Probably.
There are others who probably have the names already.
Probably.
We are probably right now in the lag phase where reporters present subjects of an investigation with reasonable time to respond, and while lawyers review the reports before they're published, and those build a natural pause into the system. To any government official or political party official listening to this, there's a very good chance that you are right now, in that lag. You might not be there in 2 or 3 days. And do you want to be proactive or reactive?
Well,
and I'm not, again...
It's Canada, so I mean,
To repeat Jen's point, we're not asking for criminal charges. We're not asking for irrevocable consequences. We are asking that this government of Canada demonstrate that it has the ability to defend itself and that we have systems in place that allow people who have been accused of crimes against this country to be removed from positions of power pending an investigation. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing for the public to ask for. And if people in Ottawa weren't so in their own bumholes, I think they would know that. But I think they have forgotten because they're too far away from normal people.
Matt, I think that you said something very important at the event last night, and I want you to reiterate it here for the podcast. But you made a point about how accountability actually works in this country, and I would totally ask you just to reiterate it because it was a brilliant set of observations.
You can see I'm rubbing my headache away even thinking about it. Yeah,
exactly. But essentially what we're at a point now where NSICOP's released a report without releasing names, which again, I think goes to a really dangerous reflexive instinct that has been now baked into the Canadian body politic against openness and accountability and transparency. We can no longer continue to tolerate that, frankly. And I think I think that was an error on NSCOP's part. I'm sorry, but I do. We have a political party that has responded to that report, presumably by knowing the names, but refusing to release or respond to that at all. We have people who are now saying, well, you know what, this is now a matter for the RCMP to investigate. And until the RCMP comes back with a final investigation, we can't possibly respond or do anything about it, which is bullshit. We have the police or the RCMP responding by saying, well, there's an ongoing investigation and we can't possibly comment to do anything to put at risk the investigation, which is also less bullshit, but kind of bullshit. I have more sympathy for the RCMP here than I do for any other party, because I do think that the RCMP probably doesn't want to do anything that might prejudice a future case. I think their logic is more sound than anybody else's. But as you've noted now amply and ably, there is no reason why you can't kick someone out of caucus pending an investigation. That's reasonable. It just means that you have to take accountability for what's happening in your caucus.
What I said at the event last night, it's not the first time I made this point, and I have a terrible feeling it will not be the last time I make this point, is that through a process in this country, and it was a process because it was gradual, I think some of it was accidental and well-meaning. I think some of it was overt, deliberate sabotage for a narrow political ends, but I think this country's accountability mechanisms have been nerfed. We do not have accountability mechanisms that function well in this country. And very hard to get anyone fired, very hard to get anyone investigated. Like, you basically need the full, you said it already, you need either the full weight of an outraged parliament using its privileges to compel testimony and witness production and things like that, or you need a public inquiry. Anything short of that, we're now at a point where it is almost impossible to get accountability. No one in this country gets fired. And you've laid out a bit of a pattern here. This is what I think, even now, could still easily happen. The federal government will decide that this is a law enforcement matter. They will ask the RCMP to investigate. They will then not provide the RCMP with the necessary documents that would allow the RCMP to effectively investigate. And there may well be good reasons about intelligence sharing, but there could also be plenty of cynical reasons. Oh, that's cabinet confidence. Can't share that.
Well, and at this point,
will eventually decide they can't lay charges, and the feds will go, hey, we can't comment on an ongoing investigation, which will then morph into, hey, the RCMP looked into it and decided to lay no charges, and we don't question the police. That would be inappropriate of us. I can see it already.
And can I just also make this point, is that we've already seen this government at every level basically hide behind the excuse of national security. Mm-hmm. In moments when it is not appropriate or correct to hide behind the excuse of national security. So at this point, I give the government literally zero benefit of the doubt on that front. I just don't. I don't think they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. They don't deserve our trust on that front. And if you see somebody hiding sort of cabinet documents or issues behind the excuse that it's a national security risk, fuck off. I'm sorry. Frankly, I don't even really care at this point. The transparency and the trust principle overwhelms the national security risk at this point.
I think we do need to get, I think what we need as citizens, but also, and again, I'm speaking directly through this microphone to our government officials now. What is the basic fundamental first order priority of this government? What is the basic fundamental first order need of Canada? What do we as a nation require our leaders to do? And probably there should be conversations about mechanisms to deal with this sort of thing, ways of handling classified information. If someone wants to say to me that we need new procedures and protocols in place to deal with this perfectly in the future, I go, okay. But right now, we have to use the imperfect tools we have, or we have to concede that we as a government, again, have nerfed our accountability mechanisms to the point where we are incapable of defending ourselves from this kind of foreign interference. And I do not presume right now, as a statement of basic fact, that we are capable of defending ourselves from foreign interference. I think it is very possible that a combination of institutional problems and, frankly, political cowardice has left us quite literally incapable of defending ourselves. And I want to be wrong about that. But the last line of defense for Canadian national security, and I love the guy, but it can't be Sam Cooper. Like, the only thing standing between us and our increasingly hostile world cannot be Sam. And Coop, I love you, buddy. I think you know that. But I'm just saying, you need some help.
It's an unfair and unreasonable burden to be putting on Sam Cooper.
With
a Substack,
I mean, we cannot send Steve Chase and Bob Fife out to reinforce him and call it a day. Like, this has got to be, and we talk about the accountability mechanisms, right? The press is an accountability mechanism. And the press, imperfect as we are, and overwhelmed and underfunded as we are, we have, collectively using the royal we, and the line has certainly done our part. We've tried to amplify this stuff. We are doing our part to put the pressure on the government to fix this. And rather than responding to the prodding and fixing it, governments have repeatedly calculated that they can wait us out and public attention will move on. And they're probably right about that to an extent, Jen. But what that basically means is that they are prioritizing avoiding politically awkward decisions above protecting the integrity of Canada and the national security of Canada. I want to be very explicit about this. I am accusing our political class of prioritizing their own political and, frankly, personal comfort over the national security interests of Canada. And I'd like them to stop.
On that note, please like and subscribe to The Line. This episode of The Line has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada, which is dedicated to helping Canadians who are looking to quit smoking understand the full range of options available. Despite decades of government programs and regulations, today nearly 5 million Canadian adults smoke cigarettes. Adult smokers who choose to continue to smoke should be aware that other options exist. Right now, accessing information about these options is heavily restricted in Canada. While not risk-free, alternatives such as heated tobacco and vaping products provide a potentially less harmful choice than cigarettes. Cigarettes burn tobacco, resulting in smoke that contains 6,000 harmful chemicals that are associated with smoking-related disease and death. Heating tobacco and vaping products have the potential to significantly reduce this risk. Health agencies around the world are now considering these alternatives to help end smoking. Updated laws can help adult smokers better understand the full range of options available, including the relative risk of these products. Millions of Canadians smoke cigarettes. Technology exists that can help change that, but policymakers need to take action. Learn about how a smoke-free future can be achieved at unsmoke.ca.
So this is a fun one.
Is it though? Is it fun? I mean, is it fun for you, or is it fun?
No. You know what? I'll be honest. I'm not laughing at this one.
Because I think that lots of people are laughing at this one. I don't think they're going to be laughing when I continue to explain what's happening in Calgary right now.
Well, I mean, it's funny just to the extent, Jen, that our timing is excellent. Because
it's darkly hilarious. It's darkly hilarious. I will give you that.
The Line in recent weeks has been writing about infrastructure vulnerability in this country, and we're in Edmonton today. We're recording this on a Friday. I got here late Wednesday, and you drove up on Thursday for our event Thursday night, and you had to build time in your schedule to have a shower here because
a giant major water main broke in Calgary. Apparently, so this is a water main. It's a 50-year-old water main that goes through a part of Calgary called Bowness, which I used to live in Bowness, by the way. Bowness is a bit of an interesting place. It used to be a little like a bedroom community of Calgary that eventually Calgary got large enough and consumed it. But it's a really mixed community. It's a real mixed bag of a community. You kind of have a real mixed socioeconomic status. You have a main line down there that you don't get in other communities in the city. So it's a really interesting place. It's also a place that, because of the way that it was built and constructed, I think also has a lot of older infrastructure. allegedly this particular water main is one of the main trunk lines that feeds almost all of the city. And it's, to give you a perspective of this, it's like a 2 meter large pipe. Like, it's huge. It's a gigantic pipe that flows an incredible amount of water.
If I was walking
Well,
down the middle of it, I would not hit my head.
yeah, exactly. You could put a truck through this pipe. It's very, very large. And what's happened, we don't exactly know what's happened. We know this main was scheduled for routine maintenance back in April. So very recently has undergone major maintenance. Something happened, we don't know what yet. This thing exploded, and essentially the entire section of that city has been flooded out. There is now a boil water advisory for this community in Calgary. And I woke up on Thursday morning to an emergency alert saying, holy shit, please don't use water because our water supplies are collapsing. So much water is flowing out of this water main pipe that we've been told, like, not only is it just don't water your plants and don't wash your cars, we mean like don't shower. Like, you can still fill a pot of water and like cook a thing of pasta. You can still take a drink of water. There still is enough water to drink. But the concern, like, they put a fire ban in place in Calgary. They're like, the concern is that if, like, for example, a local house were to catch fire right now, there would be insufficient supplies to fight the fire. That's concerning. And I think the other question is, normally a typical water main break, according to the mayor, takes about 2 days to fix. This is not a typical water main break. We still can't like get the water out of the space to determine what exactly is broken and therefore what needs to be fixed, or how it got broken. So this is now a problem that I think could be extending days, if not weeks. And not only could it take days or not weeks for the particular affected community that now has the boil water advisory and is flooded out, but we could be looking at very serious, very significant water restrictions in the rest of Canada, or sorry, the rest of the city for days, if not weeks. The other thing that concerns me about all of this is, I think that we've now reached a point where they've figured out how to turn the valve off. But we've lost a lot of water. Our water, we're in a drought situation here in Alberta. We've lost a lot of water from like the Glenmore Reservoir, I believe. I don't know what the long-term implications of that are going to be for the city in terms of our water use. So, non-zero chance we could be in this weird situation where Calgarians are like, yeah, you can't bathe for a couple weeks. Do sponge baths. You know what I mean? Like, it could be one of these weird situations. What's bizarre about all of this is the way that this has been communicated to Calgarians, I think, is being communicated with an insufficient degree of alarm. There's very much a casual tone to all of this where it's like, please reduce your water usage by 25%, which is communicating to Calgarians that this is just a minor inconvenience for most of us. And, this will be resolved in a day or two. I think that's the tone of the way this is being communicated. But I'm looking at the facts of what are being communicated, and I'm alarmed. Like, I'm almost wondering if I need to stock up on water before I head back to Edmonton, because I don't know how much longer we're going to have potable water supplies in our city. I'm also kind of wondering, like, shoot, do my husband and I need to get out of town for a couple weeks? I get that I'm not going to be watering my garden, and best of luck to the tomato plants. That's fine. That's crappy, but that happens. That's life. But if you're going to be telling us that we're going to be sponge bathing the kids all summer, well, we can go swimming in the river, I guess. But this gets real. It's hard for people, I think, in a first world scenario to conceptualize the idea that water might not come out of the tap. That's a really, really hard thing for us to wrap our heads around.
In 2003, the Great North American Blackout, the Eastern North America Blackout, one of the things I was thinking of, because this is just the way my brain's wired, City of Toronto reservoir system has 24 hours of water at any given time, and it's electrical pumping stations, or 8 hours of firefighting. So you can burn through with heavy hoses running to douse a large fire. A city can burn through its water supply 3 times faster than normal consumption. And I interviewed a Calgary Herald reporter this morning on my SiriusXM radio show, and I asked him, what's the latest? And he says the latest from city officials is Jen, you've summarized it well. They haven't even been able to clear out the flooding from around the site of the break yet. So they haven't had engineers go down and look at it yet. But he also said this latest from city officials right now is that with the city basically being told, don't use your dishwasher, don't use your washing machine, don't wash your car. Pools are closed, hockey rinks are closed, anything that requires large amount of water. He says supply and demand for water in Calgary right now is, the city officials are saying, like perfectly balanced. So some careless smoker or some electrical fault sets off a warehouse fire and Calgary runs out of water in 6 hours. So,
Well, the other thing I'd say is perfectly balanced with people not taking showers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's not going to be sustainable if we're looking at a repair that could take weeks, right? So yeah, I've got some real concerns about heading home. Like I said, I don't think that we're going to be, dying of thirst. I like to think that we have a better logistical grasp on the situation than that. Like, but I mean, are we going to be trucking in potable water supplies? Like that's
there already are. There are water trucks in some parts of Calgary.
In Bowness, those sorts of areas, there already are those, but there's not enough of those to supply the entire city. So where are we going here? And also the other concern that I have is, okay, so we get, say in the next day or two, we manage to get this entire area pumped out and engineers can get down there. What if the engineers take a look at the water main break and say, this is so catastrophic, this is going to take a month to fix? Like where are we there? Like, what does that mean? Do we need to start canceling Stampede? Do we need to start saying, people need to leave the city in order to ease water supply usage if they can? Like this, I know it sounds really funny because it's like Calgary doesn't have water, haha. But like there's more than 1 million people in Calgary. That could get very difficult very quickly if we don't resolve this very quickly. And I'm hoping that we will. But anyway, I think this is just darkly hilarious to us because, this week, Matt, you had a column about the State of Good Repair report and noted that Canadian municipalities right across the country have millions, if not billions of dollars in backlog in terms of not building new things.
Hundreds of billions,
sorry. Hundreds of billions of dollars of unspent money, or money that we've just not spent appropriately, not on building anything new, just maintaining the state of what we have. We are hundreds of billions of dollars behind. We're, eventually we were going to start to see the consequences of that, not only in sort of roads, potholes, those sorts of issues, but massive and catastrophic water main breaks is exactly where we would expect to see those kinds of deficits show up. The other thing that I think this highlights for us, and again, this is something that you made a point in this column. This was last week's column. We have governments that have lost touch with the core functions of government, and as a result have prioritized spending attention and time on increasingly shallow and frivolous bullshit. Water's a core function of municipal government, guys. No water, you die. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
the bottom foundation of the pyramid, like the needs pyramid.
If you can't get water into the city, there's no city. The water, you need certain amounts of it, or you can't bathe or drink. It's not even a fundamental core function of government. It's a fundamental core function of civilization. Okay? The Romans had this one topped out.
I'm going to wait and I'm going to see how things unfold in Calgary. And obviously,
sure,
God willing, things go well. But I mean, a couple of immediate column ideas occur to me. So hashtag spoilers. One, why was one pipe the only thing between Calgary and evacuation? Like, why did
one 50-year-old pipe?
So that's a problem. Any system with a critical failure mode needs to have redundancies, and it looks like Calgary has only barely. The other issue, and you've touched on this, is whether or not Calgary's emergency preparedness system was in a position where it was able to communicate this effectively to the people. It seems like the decision to use the emergency alert function on phones was good, but it also seems like it took about 12 hours, and there were people who were probably having bubble baths that night because they hadn't put on the evening news or opened the Calgary Herald website and were burning through water because there was a decision to not rapidly communicate to the public the severity of the problem. And the other thing we're going to find out, and I don't know, I don't prejudge this. There's one part of our society I actually do have a lot of faith in, and salute to you guys. It's engineers. Engineers are smart, but I'm honestly curious when the engineers get there. And I don't say this to be pessimistic. I am agnostic and sincerely curious. What is the repair going to need in terms of spare parts, equipment, and personnel? And do we have access to all three?
So it sounds like that is a good note in all of this. Gondek did an interview today that I watched, and she said because the line had recently undergone maintenance, a lot of the basic equipment is to hand, and a lot of the basic spare parts are believed to be to hand. So that is something that hopefully continues to work out. I mean, the other interesting thing that I saw when I saw Gondek doing an interview when it was on Global News is that she's being very quick to put the blame on this on federal and provincial bodies of government for underfunding critical maintenance and infrastructure.
No, they do that.
That's correct, by the way. Like she's right to note that that is a critical problem, but holy shit, is that a dangerous line of attack in a point where we still don't even know what caused the break on a line that actually had just undergone maintenance. It could be very well possible that this line has been appropriately funded and maintained, but somebody made a critical error in the process of that maintenance, and that's what's caused this particular failure. So, like I said, she's not wrong in the general picture of things. We have as we've noted, we know that we're hundreds of billions of dollars behind on some of this basic stuff. So she's correct to point that out, but I think it's really dangerous for her to make that point before we have to start attacking, basically, firstly, when we haven't even cleared out the water from the well to figure out what went wrong. I think I think there's to try and engage in blame shifting when we're still in the midst of an emergency. I think that's probably a dangerous thing for her to do.
The only thing I'm going to add to that, and then I actually have 1 2-minute thing to add after the next like and subscribe. Something just occurred to me to mention that just to round out the podcast, but we're in Edmonton. We're recording this in Edmonton. It's Friday. You're going back to Calgary tonight. I'm going back to Toronto tonight. You're going back to a city with questionable water supplies. I'm going back to a city that only at the last minute avoided a transit strike. I was just planning on living in Edmonton for a while, and I was going to invite you and your whole family. We would have rented a huge line Airbnb. We would have done a special subscriber appeal. I would have not had to worry about the subway being closed, and you would have been able to take a bath.
You know what? And you would have been able to cheer for the Oilers in their attempts to win the Stanley Cup. Go Oilers, go! Yeah, would have been the place to be, man.
There was this great statement from Toronto officials on Thursday saying, "Have a plan B for transit." In a metro area that big and that dense, there is no plan B. So what are we supposed to do? Plan B for the TDC, Plan B for municipal water systems, Plan B for your healthcare, Plan B for Parliament being able to protect itself from national security threats, Plan B for the military not being able to fight, Plan B for the courts not being able to sentence people. What the fuck are we doing?
Plan B is move to America. Plan B is move to America. Which brings me back to the column that I just wrote for the line, which you should check out about brain drain. So there you go. Like and subscribe. We're a ray of sunshine, you and me. On that note, we're literally about to get kicked out of our Airbnb here, man.
Bring me back after like and subscribe. I'll tell you why. Don't worry. It'll be a 1-minute thing.
All right.
We are about to get kicked out of the house, but I just wanted to mention the interest rate cut we were expecting came this week. The Bank of Canada did drop interest rates, and I'm just mentioning this because I am honestly fascinated whether or not the rates will come down fast enough in the time remaining between the next election for Canadians to start to forgive and forget how angry they are about interest rates. My gut feeling is no. In the same way that people in Calgary, Jen, are going to remember the week without water or the months without water, people are going to remember how expensive their mortgage and their credit cards and their car loans got. But I wanted to put a pin on it. It just felt weird to end this podcast without noting that because we've talked so much about the cost of living. So Canadians, some relief did come your way this week. You will probably get more relief before the end of this calendar year. You will almost certainly get more relief before the next election. Does that do the feds any favors?
Well, no, because the interest rates are only one factor in the cost of living increase.
Yeah.
Firstly, like
Yep.
they're not going to, your grocery bills aren't going to collapse in 2 weeks. And secondly, the other thing is that there are many of us, including myself, by the way, who have already renewed at the higher rate.
Yeah.
So
And millions of more who'll have to.
yeah, and even people who are renewing it, like say, I think it's 4.75% as opposed to 5. Great, super, but your rates still are double what they were probably the last time you renewed your mortgage.
Yeah.
So it's no, I don't think that this resolves any issues at all.
But at least you can go home tonight, Jen, and have a nice bubble bath and think about your new higher mortgage rate. You know what? All kidding aside, I drove to Pearson when I flew out to Edmonton. I drove because I was not confident the express would be running when I got back to take it back to Toronto. So
Great,
I
everything's going great here in Canada. We're just everything's just super. Like and subscribe to the line, and thank you for joining us. And again, thank you for joining us in Edmonton, Edmontonians. You are delightful and the best.
You're a great host, Edmonton. We'll see you again soon. Go
Cheers.
low.
Today's podcast was brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Now is the time to modernize Canadian laws so that adult smokers have information and access to better alternatives. By doing so, we can create lasting change. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.